Well, hey there, everybody. Welcome to Inside Sailing. Peter Eisler here, and thank you very much for joining us on the first Inside Sailing of July. Hard to believe when we kicked this whole thing off. It was getting dark in San Diego around this time, but by the end of the show, now, hey, we got hours more sunlight, and this is going to be a great show. I've had this on my list since day one when we came up with the idea, when lockdown started, of doing a Get Sailing on TV, internet style show, and I am really, really looking forward to this one. Now, first of all, an admission. If you know me or if you've read anything I've written, when people ask me, a generic interview, hey, what if you could sail any boat, what would you be sailing? And my answer has always been a windsurfer. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool windsurfer. I got into it very early on. I got into the wave sailing out in Hawaii. I got into speed sailing. I have some pretty good equipment. It's a little aged now. But through the process, the reason that it attracts me is the speed. You're close to the water, the speed, the thrill. It's just, and you're one-on-one. I mean, I just love it. But over the last, I guess you'd have to say 20 years or so, this kiteboarding phenomena has hit my radar. And at first, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, I kind of hedged away from it because I'm a little bit like a skier, like, I'm not going to go snowboarding. But hey, I'm converted, and I really am hooked on kiteboarding. I'm still a newbie, but to be able to share this show with you and this incredible sport and all the aspects of it is going to be really, really fun. So with that, I am really, really proud to be able to introduce to you a good friend of mine all the way across the country in North Carolina, Trip Foreman. Now, Trip is one of the really founders of kiteboard education, and he is runs and founded with his good friend, the co-founded Real Water Sports, which is the place to learn to kiteboard in North America. Hey, Trip, how's it going?
Peter, how are you?
All
From
good.
North Carolina. I'm excited to be here, and hats off to you and Trick last night on that jam session. That was definitely worth tuning into.
Well, we got to stay warmed up when you let us to come back and play on the big stage.
So I loved your intro with windsurfing. I myself as well. Like I started windsurfing with my dad at the age of 8 years old, and there wasn't a minute between 8 years old and 32 years old that I didn't think about windsurfing day and night. And but kiteboarding came along, and we started doing it in light wind, and it kind of over time it kind of took over all the time that I was windsurfing. And you mentioned my business partner here at Real, Matt Nuzzo. One time he overheard somebody saying, hey, are you going windsurfing today? And I said, completely loose. It just fell out of my mouth. I said, no, man, sorry, windsurfing's been canceled. And that was for me, but Matt heard it. And that's actually where that bumper sticker that's kind of world famous came from.
My, oh my, how times have changed. Well, speaking about your sailing background, there he is, the man himself at the
Yeah, that's on our family sailboat. That's just after the start of the Newport Bermuda race. And I got to tell you, there's a lot of people out there in the world that are pretty down right now that they weren't in Bermuda last week. And, I got the absolute privilege to do that race with my dad, my sister, and a lot of longtime friends on our series of boats. That boat right there, that's Jacqueline 4, and that's a Hinckley competition Southwest 42. And just unbelievable memories, and just a great way to spend Father's Day weekend, I can tell you that.
Well, that's the thing. The ASA is all about opening the door of sailing to new sailors and to continue to show all those other doors that there are to existing sailors. And we thank all the ASA members and ASA certified sailors that are joining us today. But that too, we both started sort of in the same genre of junior sailing program and a little bit of racing and big boat sailing. But then how about it? This is Trip as well, right?
Yeah, so that's on a recent trip to Fiji, and that's on a wave just off of Namotu Island. That's called Namotu Lefts. And we went over there on a combination kiting and surfing trip. And, you know, one of the things that kiteboarding is really good for is it's just another tool in your toolbox. And especially, you know, for surfers, they're going on a trip halfway around the world, which actually that place is exactly halfway around the world from here. You want to be prepared, you know, for all the conditions. So you can see right there, obviously the surf is real blown out, but I'm able to take the same surfboard that I was surfing and go out on a kiteboarding kite and, you know, and just have a really good time. I mean, that session right there was just unbelievable. And, you know, if I was just a surfer and no kite, I would be really bummed to be that far out away from home and have the surf get blown out. But I'm definitely not bummed out right there.
Wind and waves, what could be better? All right, so we're going to go now and Trip, just sort of take us through all the different some of the different aspects and ways that people play the game of kiting these days.
So Peter, yeah, that's a great, you know, great way to start out, because I think the thing that's really interesting about kiteboarding is how many different things you can do with it, and then also how many feeder sports that it has coming into it. And looking at kiteboarding and looking at sailing, I'd say that, you know, the most basic form of kiteboarding is actually a lot like sailing, in that you're just reaching back and forth. And that's, you know, basically when people learn how to kiteboard, they learn how to go downwind first because the kite's pulling them more downwind. But being able to set an edge and going back and forth across the wind, which would basically be, you know, like on a dinghy, it would be, you know, just beam reaching back and forth. And you'll see, you know, even if you have more advanced kiters that are doing tricks, you know, in between those tricks, they are basically sailing back and forth across the wind. So, you know, if you're coming from a sailing background, you've got a lot of advantage, I think, coming into the sport, because you already understand wind direction. You understand wind speeds. Like when you're looking at the water, you're familiar with what the water looks like with wind speeds. And then that's able to, you know, you're able to then pick the right size kite for that wind. So back, you know, being able to kite back and forth is super fun. And you get the sensation of speed. You get the sensation of upward lift from the kite. And believe it or not, I mean, to the sailor, these things look like really big spinnakers on really small boats. But after a while, when you learn how to edge against the kite, you're actually able to point upwind quite high and make your way upwind, even with that big kite trying to pull you downwind. The edge of the board and the aerodynamic nature of the kite, you're able to get that thing forward in the wind window and edge upwind at quite a steep angle.
I just want to point out for the viewers there that previous slide was yours truly, just, you know, hoping that I was going to be beam reaching and not broad reaching, which, as Trip pointed out, is sort of your first step as you start shredding on the kiteboard. Then there's this aspect of the game.
So, I mean, I think jumping is why a lot of people get into kiteboarding, you know, and when people ask us about kiteboarding and, you know, they're interested in getting into it, I think the thing you'll hear a lot of people here say, and then, you know, a lot of people around the world, is it's literally like a video game. Because once you get the back and forth reaching down, and then you start learning how to jump, you have the ability to jump off of dead flat water, you know, 20, 30, and, as you know, in this picture, even higher than that, off the water, just by turning the kite up towards 12 o'clock in the sky and then edging away from it and building the line tension up until you pop off the water. And so, you know, it's literally just like hitting a button on a video game. Like, I want to jump, I want to jump, I want to jump. And you go, you know, that much higher up. The cool thing about where we live, you know, both of those pictures and this video is where we are here in Cape Hatteras. And you can see those grass islands, and you can see how windy it is upwind of that island. And obviously the chop that's associated with the wind. That's actually a great picture. That's one of our coaches, Nick Baines. And then the previous picture, the guy jumping both of our buildings here, that's Ryan Osmond. You look at how smooth the water is downwind of those islands. Those islands block all the chop, and it gives you, you know, water surface conditions very similar to what you would get, you know, early morning wakeboarding or water skiing. So super flat water. and really easy to edge against and get that pop off of the water and get really high up in the air. So the jumping is straight up addictive and just a really big part of kiting. If you back up to that picture of Ryan, cool thing about being that high is you can actually see the ocean over, like he's in the Pamlico Sound right there, which is the inland body of water where we are. And when you get to that height, you can actually see the ocean over all the land. And
it's a good escape vehicle when the hurricanes come, right?
You can get out of here really quick.
Speaking of which.
So yeah, so this is a video, shot during a downwinder, and actually no, this video's on what they call the dark side of the slick, which is just outside that island that's outside of Reel, and you're seeing a lot of jumping here, and you can also see the mechanics of like how they're using the kite to pull them off the water, and also the turning of the bar and then the sheeting in and sheeting out of the bar. And so a great POV angle as well.
Obviously, you don't need a ramp to get a jump. It's mostly done with the sail or the kite, right?
Well, I mean, you could do it off of dead flat water, like just off of just mirror glass. In that sort of scenario, you're using the pull of the kite, like you turn the kite upwards, but you want to have a hook with your board away from the kite. Similar to the hook, if you're like powder snowboarding or powder skiing, that hook that you give away from the fall line and then you pop up, that hook is actually what causes you to leave the water at a planned moment. And it also really loads those lines up and gets you off the water higher. So learning that hook is actually what separates more of an advanced jumper from an intermediate or novice jumper who's just getting ripped off the water at an unplanned time, like when the kite hits 12 o'clock. That pink board, that's Mike Fanuff. He's our core kite rep. Basically, he takes care of like all the tech with the core kites and gets everybody teched out here on those.
That's some parking job he just did there. We didn't learn that in our first lesson, 0 to hero course. That wheel. So then we gave a little teaser of this, but a whole other discipline. In fact, a different board too, right?
Yeah, so here we're looking, these are actually photos from the Cape Hatteras Wave Classic, which is a wave or a kite surfing event that we put on in the ocean here. And it's sponsored by Patagonia. They've partnered to help us put the event on. And you're looking at one of the past women's champions. Her name is Yalu Langery, and she's from Holland. And you can see she's riding what's called a kite surfboard. And so, basically a kite surfboard is shaped exactly like a surfboard, a lot of times a little bit narrower just to control the power of the kite. But, it acts the exact same way. It typically has 3 or 4 fins like a surfboard. And, the main reason that you ride that board versus a twin tip is so that you get a more surfy carve to it. You could actually ride the wave just like you would on a surfboard and throw spray just like you would on a surfboard. And Yalu is one of the best women in the world at kite surfing, and she definitely turns heads when she's out there.
Wow. Well, I think if you're up for it, I think we're going to challenge your tech team and have Jake do a little camera work, and maybe you can show off. I know you're at the Reel shop there in Waves, North Carolina. I'm going to give you full screen and show us those 2 types of boards.
Okay, so we were just talking about the kite surfboard. So, here's basically a kite surfboard. This one's made by FCD, by Fletcher Chenard, and you could basically look at it. It has a very similar profile to a regular surfboard. You look at the fin setup, and these are actually the same fins that you would run in a standard surfboard. They're the Almeric future fin setup, and these are like a medium size, but looking at the dimensions of this board, it's 5'8" by 18 by 2 1/8. And, for those of you that are familiar with flotation in a board, it's got 24 liters of float. So, these boards, you can look at this board, right? And you can see it has no foot straps. It just has a full-length deck pad. So in kite surfing, people use a tail pad with wax, or they'll use a full-length deck pad, or they'll use foot straps. And that just really depends on the preference of the rider. And then in some cases, if people ride, you know, both styles, both strapless and strapped, you know, if it's more demanding conditions or just really, really junky waves and super windy, they'll ride foot straps for the jumping aspect of it. But that's not to say that you can't jump the board strapless as well, just leading it into the wind and holding it against your feet with the wind pushing against it from the other way.
Sounds
so that's
easy.
that's the Kite Surfboard.
Yep.
You want to take a look at that twin tip, Peter?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out to the audience that that looked like a boat or a surfboard or a windsurfer. That boat had a bow and a stern, but now this is a twin tip, which a lot of people learn on these days. All the jumpers were riding. Go for it.
Right. So you could tell, I mean, obviously by the name twin tip, you know, this board is symmetrical. This is a slingshot misfit. This is 143 centimeters. So this would be the size that I would ride in this board. And, you know, they have 4 fins, really small, you know, wakeboard style fins. And these are 1 3/4 inches. So 1.75. They're made out of G10 material. There's obviously 2 foot straps on here for your feet to go into. Really, really nice padded footbeds. Because, I mean, if you look at some of those jumps like Ryan's or Nick's jumps, you're way up there. So you want to have good padding between you and the board. Nice foot straps to hold you in. There's also a tow bar right here that you're able to grip with your toes just to hold yourself on. There's also a handle typically in the middle of the board, and that allows you to have something in the middle of the board that you can grab to put it, you know, to grab it in the middle and then put it on both of your feet. So, and it's symmetrical. That way the transitions, or in sailing you would call them jibes, the transitions from one direction to the other are easy because you could just slide the board one direction or the other and end up going out toe side or heel side or spinning it midway. So it just makes it a little bit easier to turn around. If you're riding a directional, you have to switch your feet, which in windsurfing, you had the people that could jibe and then the people that never learned how to jibe. So the twin tip is really good for people who never learned how to jibe because you don't ever have to jibe.
Yep, the both ends are of the bow, back and forthing specialty. Okay, well, we're going to go back and take a couple more, some looks at some more surfing right here.
This is down at the Cape Hatteras Lighthouse, actually. And you can see, you know, for as tall as that wave is, it's about twice as thick. There's a lot of water right there. And that's Ryder Decker, who's won that event several times. And he's riding that board strapless right now. So like perfect positioning in that wave from a true surfer's perspective. So he's not riding it windsurf style. He's riding it surf style right up in the pocket, and a really hard hit right in the pocket, and doing it strapless as well, which is a higher difficulty level to do that. This next rider right here, this is Muna White. And, you know, if you have windsurfers out there, you know, especially Peter, you and I were talking prior to the show, Richard White, who is the inventor of the duck jibe in windsurfing. Muna is Richard's daughter, and she is now, you know, a world famous female competitor in kite surfing. She travels all over the world, and she's been here for the Cape Hatteras Wave Classic, done quite well, you know, in previous events. And, you know, now she surfs waves as well as a lot of the men. She's getting barreled, actually a lot better than a lot of the men, and is a really accomplished surfer as well.
Speaking of barrels.
So yeah, this is Kiahi, and he got, I think, second place right behind in Ryder last year in the event, and in the Cape Hatteras Wave Classic. And Kiahi, for those of you that want to do a little bit of research after the show, I highly encourage you to Google Kiahi tunnel vision. And that is a new video that he just put out. It's an edit of him traveling around the world, kite surfing around the world at some of the best barreling surfing waves in the world, and just how deep he can get in the barrel on a kite surfboard and come out is it's just completely mind-bending what he could do. And he went, you know, all over Australia, all over Africa. He went to Skeleton Bay, which is, I would probably say, the one of, if not the most famous, like, long barreling waves, and just getting barreled for hundreds of yards on these perfect regular surfing waves. And as well, he's just as accomplished of a surfer. He's been in the O'Neill Wave of the Winter, and placed really high in that as well. So really talented guy.
Then again, the wide world of kiteboarding. There's the whole park phenomena, of which Reel is an epicenter for.
Yeah. So in kiteboarding, another discipline that's become really popular is park riding, and park riding is really similar to riding the park on a snowboard or skis, or what you would see in a skateboard park. So you've got different shaped rails, and you've also got kickers. And here, these are all shots from the Wind Voyager Triple S Invitational, which was an event that we held here for 14 years. And it really showcased the highest level of park riding for both men and women. And it's, just to see what these riders are capable of doing, it was really incredible. And that's Brandon Scheid right there. And he's a multiple men's champion in the event. And it's in talking with Jake and Jeffrey and a lot of our media crew, it's tough actually filming Brandon in the park because he goes so big off of those kickers that a lot of times you're not really expecting him to do it, and he's going out of frame, on a lot of the things. So it's cool to watch. And that's actually one of the biggest sliders in our park. That's the Focus sparkling water A-frame, and that's 82 feet long right there.
Wow. I mean, I happened to be there with my daughter last year for the competition and saw some of it. It's great spectating. I mean, to see all the girls, and I was amazed at how many professional competitors there are. I mean, the women's division and the men's division. There were hundreds of kites in the sky, and then the pit crews were there. And if the wind came up a little bit, they'd all change in between the shots. But a phenomena that you need, like you say, the slicks and the protected water to really get the incredible conditions you have there. But another way to play with your twin tips. And then we have the hard water or frozen water side of kiting.
So this clip, this is Jeremy Jones, one of our team riders, and he also coaches with us. And Jeremy spends a lot of time up north in the winter, and really similar to ice sailing, like in a DN or a schooner. He is surrounded by frozen lakes. And a lot of times, you get snow on them and you can use a regular snowboard. But a lot of times when it gets windy, that snow blows away. And you can look at this picture and it's like straight black ice. And so Jeremy is now working with a company, and you can look it up online. It's Kiteboard on Ice if you're on Instagram. And they make a product called a Switchblade, which is basically, to boil it all the way down, it's a set of blades, really sharp blades that bolt onto, much like if you were going to take two speed skating blades and bolt them onto your board, onto your snowboard. And he's able to get really good grip, even on straight black ice. If you tried to ride with the pull of the kite on a regular snowboard, there's no way you'd be able to edge against it. But that gives it really good grip. So that's a Switchblade, and you can check that out on Kiteboard on Ice.
And then, of course, there's the other kind of frozen water.
So this is Jeremy again, and this is a good basic snow kiting setup. And the reason we chose to send you this video, for the show is this is like your basic field that just about everybody has access to. So lift tickets have continued to get more expensive. And, you got the travel time to the mountains, and everything's just more expensive, when you go to a mountain resort. But this is an athletic field. This is a golf course. This is a farm field. All these different places that just get covered with snow that most of the time really don't get used for anything. And so, right where this one is, there's like a natural terrain hit that Jeremy's sessioning right there. You can even see him like go up in the tree and bonk the tree a couple times on his way back down. But lift ticket price to ride, to ride that field right there is free. All you need is the wind, and you're using the same gear that you would use in the water.
And that's a snowboard though, right? Underneath them?
Yeah, so that's actually the same snowboard that he was using on the ice, minus the switchblade kit.
Right. Wow. And then for us normal sailboat sailors that go upwind and downwind, especially if you're racers, but anytime, all of a sudden, the advent of the foiling phenomena really opened up some weather gauge and some leeward gauge for kiting, didn't it?
Yeah, so the hydrofoil has really taken off in kiteboarding, and looking back at it, actually, doing a Google search for some of this material, I actually found when we tested the first hydrofoil here, which was a Carafino hydrofoil. It was 11 years ago that we were testing them here, and that was obviously a long time ago, and at this point, at this point in time, ancient equipment, because that was completely an aluminum foil bolted onto a fiberglass board, and super heavy. It had like fixed boot connections in it, and but I mean, it was the beginning. It was the beginning of foiling, and now the foils are carbon. The blades themselves are carbon. The mast itself is carbon, and the boards are styro epoxy, super light, and it's a game changer. Going from that heavy equipment to the light equipment. But what it does primarily, two things with the foil is it allows you to go in lighter wind. You can go in single digits, you can go in even mid-single digits once you understand how to do it and once you understand how to keep the kite moving. So we're talking, sub 10 miles an hour of wind, absolutely no problem, and no problem staying upwind. It also really smooths out the ride because the board isn't banging on the chop. So you're off the water and you're able to go at a higher rate of speed through the chop without getting bounced around by it.
Yeah,
so looking at that,
I was
go
in
ahead, Peter.
San Francisco Bay and was just fascinated to watch the racing on the city front. This is right there. We're looking across to Marin from the city front side of San Francisco Bay, and they're beating upwind to Golden Gate Bridge, and they go upwind. They're the fastest craft on the water going upwind, and the fastest craft on the water going downwind in San Francisco Bay, and the 20 knots. Classic summertime conditions, and that's a start. I mean, how do they keep from getting all their lines tangled is what I want to know.
That's a question that we get about all levels of kiteboarding, from the beginner level and the twin tipping and the reaching back and forth, all the way through a start like that, and to get on that starting line and to be riding a foil board, you're at the ability level there where the kite is basically it's an extension of your arm. It's like your hand, like where your hand is, even though it's this far away from you. And the kite is once you've been kiting for a while, the kite is the exact same thing. And so you have the ability to position it. On a starting line scenario, you're not only positioning your board, but you're also positioning your kite in the air amongst all the other kites that are up there. If you want to go back to that picture, the one thing that's really different about those kites compared to the other kites we're looking at is that the other kites had an inflatable leading edge and inflatable struts. The struts act a lot like battens, and the leading edge acts a lot like a mast on a normal sail. These kites in this photo are what's called ram air kites or foil kites, and there's no inflatable tubes in these kites. They're a double-sided foil that's filled with the wind itself, and it gives you cleaner foil through the wind, and it's also significantly lighter. The other thing you can see is just they're a lot higher aspect ratio, so they point higher and they're just more efficient through the wind. The downside is that if you put them in the water, they're a lot harder to get to relaunch out of the water because they don't float. They don't have those tubes in them.
Yeah, folks, I don't sail with those yet. I'm still with the inflatable ones that you have to pump up. They're a little bit more forgiving for beginners and easier to launch when I do happen to set it down and get it a little bit wet from time to time. Trip, can you show us a foil? They're so cool.
Yeah, for sure.
You mentioned the word mast, and just a sailing nomenclature, sailing terms word. For all of you regular sailors, the mast on a kite board they don't have a mast, but they do have a mast if they're a foil, because that's what they call what you and I would call a skeg. But It's that vertical fin that's holding the foil underneath.
So here, this is a complete Armstrong setup, and so we have a lot of people that come to us and they say, "Hey, I want a foil board." You know, there's just like with kites or the boards or anything, there's specialties, but this is kind of a do everything foil setup, and the entire package is from Armstrong, and this is a foil board and foil that you could kite foil on. You could also foil surf behind it, or what's called wake foiling behind a boat, like where you would go wakeboarding or water skiing. You can use the same kit behind a boat, and you can also prone paddle it like you would a surfboard, and then paddle into waves, and then get up on the board and ride the foil riding the wave. So it's a 311 board, so 3'11". And then looking at the bottom, obviously this is the what Peter was talking about. This is the mast right here. So this is a 72 centimeter mast, and then this is the 1200 front wing, and the 1200 is the square area of the wing. So this board right here, applying it to kiteboarding, this is going to help you kiteboard in less wind. And for any of your kites that you would use on a twin tip, you can use them in significantly less wind on this than you would on your twin tip. When you're looking at the racing foil boards, you're going to be using a longer mast, and then you're also going to be using a front wing and a back wing that have less area, because you're going a lot faster through the water and you don't want to have too much lift lifting you out of the water, and you also don't want to have the additional drag.
No question, that's the fastest way to go kiteboarding circa 2020, right?
Yeah, I mean, like when you're looking at like some of the speed trials, there's a lot of different, really narrow boards and asymmetrical boards, and when you're riding in, sheet glass water that you can go faster on. But, from a racing standpoint, this is definitely, when you're talking about upwind, downwind, you're not going to point any higher than on a foil, and then you can also go straight downwind at the same speeds.
Yep. All right. Well, I just wanted to show off one more foiling shot before we move on to the other aspects. But that guy's is Daniela Mora's from the Bay Area, and she is I think a sophomore at University of Hawaii. I mean, a young sailor who got into the kiteboarding and then got into the foiling. She's won 2 world championships in the women's division for foiling kiting, and she's twice been named the United States Yachtswoman of the Year. So, this is an established sport, and for her, there's all these different subdisciplines, but for her and for a lot of the kiters, or some of the kiters, that they get off on the windward, on the racing side of things, and we should all be really proud of her, really leading the way for the United States in this sport that has obviously a lot of great international sailors. I wish I could say the men are at the top of the heap right now, but they're not. So, Trip, now another thing that you can do with your boards, and one of popular activity, is forget about back and forthing and forget about having to go back upwind. Let's just go for a ride.
All right, so now we're looking at one of the oldest pictures in kiteboarding history here in Cape Hatteras. So downwinders is another thing you can do with kiteboarding. So downwinder would be really similar to backcountry snowboarding or backcountry skiing, where you're doing runs off trail, and ending at the bottom of the mountain near a road, loading up into a car and getting a ride back uphill. The difference in kiteboarding is that you're starting off upwind, and then you're doing a downwind run. This run that we're just completing right here is about a 7-mile downwind run from Kite Point in Cape Hatteras, just to that first turnout north of Avon. And by doing that downwind run, you can jump the entire way and go hundreds of yards downwind through a series of jumps and never have to worry about going upwind. You're also able to access terrain that you can't access from the road, because a lot of times there's no access to those riding spots, and you're able to get behind a lot of those grass islands and just get the butterflat water. And so the cool thing about that previous photo is that was the first downwinder that we ever did here in Cape Hatteras. That's the spring of 1998. And it's also on a 2-line kite, so prior to being able to sheet out the kite. So that's all power all the time. And 2 of my friends, Ty Luckett and Joe Toner, who were brave enough to order the first 3 kites here in the spring of '98. I'll tell you, it was interesting times for sure. So that next picture is a little bit more Nat Geo style, and Ryan Osmond, one of our photographers, got this picture, and it really shows you the beauty of the Cape Hatteras National Seashore and the terrain that you can get yourself into. You know, here you can see riders, you know, going down, you know, what looks to be, you know, a canal through the marsh. They're either S-turning, you know, carving back and forth, toe side, heel side. They're pinwheeling their kite through the air to pull them straight downwind through this stretch of water. And, you know, coming out, they're also, you know, jumping over, you know, over land, over significant distances of land. So this video is one of our coaches, Luke Johnson, and this shows you the view that you're going to be getting, you know, on some of these downwinders. And you can see Luke is really powered up. He's on a Nash 10-meter kite in this, a 10-meter pivot. And you can see the extent of, you know, how high he's getting. You can see the bar movements to launch him off of the water. You can also see the sheeting in and out of the 4-line kite, which we'll cover a little bit later. But he's also able to position himself in the air. So you can see like some slight tweaks in the air to put himself down, you know, exactly where he needs to be. Because on this run, you really have to, I mean, it's a lot like going down through a snowboard park and with the really big kickers. You really got to be precise where you're landing. And at Luke's level, you know, it's, again, it just really ends up being like a video game. It's insane to watch.
Yeah, you're a jet fighter pilot having to think really quick there. I mean, it's what a cool video. And that bar that he's talking about, of course, is what he's holding on to with the hands. Let's go back in time to how this all got started.
So yeah, this picture is Corey Rosler, and he's like he's the godfather of kiteboarding. And so if you go all the way to the top of the chain of who was the first kiter, you know, there may be somebody before Corey, but I think everybody in kiteboarding would recognize Corey as the one that really paid his dues and paved the way for a lot of people. His kite was a hard frame kite, no inflatable technology. And then if you look at the size of his bar versus the size of Luke's bar, I mean, basically Luke's hands fill up his bar, and there's really no bar beyond like just the width of his hands. Although he does have some like meaty claws, you know, his bar is about 17 inches, 18 inches long, where Corey's bar is, you know, multiple feet long. The other thing, if you go to the next picture, is looking at the technology that he was working with. So there's a reel on that bar, and he, you know, would have to have the kite fully reeled in, launch it, hit the clutch, let the line go out, and then, you know, go take his session. And then if he crashed his kite, or at the end of the session, he would then have to reel it in. So let's say, you know, you crash a metal framed kite in the water, you have to reel yourself all the way to the kite, relaunch it, let it all the way out, and then go again. And because there's no sheeting ability on that kite, again, that kite's all power all the time. Corey rode you know, basically like a slalom water ski, and that allowed, you know, just like slalom water skis behind a boat, it allowed a lot of edging ability against the kite, which was the only way to depower the kite. By edging the kite, by edging against it, you could push it forward in the wind window, and get it out of that main hit of power. You can get it forward, which is helping him stay in a balance of power, but it's also helping him either go across the wind or upwind.
Yeah, I love. I mean, look at the battens. That's a sail flying in the sky. It's so different now. And look at the bar, which is about, like you say, 3 times longer than the control bars are now. There's no more reel, and instead of 2 control lines, we'll see them before. Now, this is an early kite as well.
So yeah, that's our first downwinder ever in Puerto Rico, and so that was from Hobos Beach. This is like on the northwest corner, like in the Aguadilla Isabela area, and that's a picture coming into Shack's Beach, launching at Hobos Beach upwind, and then coming into Shack's, and that's a 5-meter Whippica free air on a 7.6 directional, and back then, that's 2-line. There's again, no 4-line, so no sheeting in and out, no depowering the kite. But also, with that picture, that we still weren't really going upwind yet. And so it was more, just big spinnaker on a small boat. And as you know, with spinnakers, you really don't go upwind. So you really had to hit the landing spot at the end. Otherwise, you're in big trouble.
So now here's the modern equipment, and this is why it's so important, and really probably one of the changes in the hardware that's allowed for the kiteboard boom, because not all of us have guns like the guys that could handle those spinnakers.
So back in the 2-line days, you just had to eat a lot of bacon. That was like the secret to success. You had to eat a lot of red meat and a lot of bacon to be able to edge that hard. But with the 4 lines, it kind of opened it up to pretty much anybody. Like if you were, if you could sail a laser or a sunfish, or you could snowboard, or you could ski, then you could learn how to kiteboard. Once they came out with good 4-line kites that were able to be depowered. And also at that same time, the instructional programs advanced quite a bit, the teaching methods, and the combination of the better teaching methods and the kites that depower, it made it a lot easier to learn. And so now, we have, kids, well below 10 years old learning all the way up to, seniors in their 70s that kiteboard, regularly. Actually, a lot of them, kiteboard more than, because they're retired, they're not working, they kiteboard a lot more than people in their 20s. So it just made it a lot more accessible, I think, to a wider audience once that equipment was developed. And, basically the pull of the kite is all driven down through the front lines, which are the center lines. And then that's attached to the chicken loop, which directly attaches to your harness. And so all of the pull is attached to a hook that's either at your waist or a little bit lower if you're using a seat harness. And then the outside lines are what's sheeting the kite in or sheeting out. And those act really similarly to a sheet on a sail, like pulling it in or pulling it out. But they also have the ability to turn the kite with those outside lines, and that's how you're, turning the kite for a turn, but also turning the kite to power it up by diving it straight down.
Yeah, I remember the 2-line days. My friends started doing it, and it was still quite physical and relatively dangerous. Whereas all of a sudden here, as you say, you've got so much more control and ability to. Basically, you've got a main sheet that you can ease off when you're learning to go and just flag the power off. Now, here's some other aspects of kite-powered vehicles.
So, kites have, just like there's a lot of feeder sports coming into kiteboarding, like the kites have gone outside of kiteboarding and are now, going into other sports as well. And so this is kite, using a kite to power a boat. And this is, at the time, he was the kite designer for Nash Kiteboarding, but since then he's actually gone out on his own to really pursue this interest of kite boating. This is Don Montague. And you could see, in that video, them using a really large inflatable frame kite, the exact same technology as what we use on the water for kiteboarding or kite surfing, but supersized in order to pull that, that cruising catamaran. And, there's applications where you can use that for your normal, your normal mode of transportation. And then there was also some use of the kites on super tankers to conserve fuel when they were in downwind, trade wind routes. And also as an emergency jury rig in offshore sailboats. In the event that they ever lost the mast, then they could use the kite to get to the nearest port.
And here's from a modern day.
So this is called the Kite Tender, and this is like a series production dinghy that has been made from the ground up to be used with a kite. And so, the design of the boat, the design of the hull, where all the hardware is, even the ability to hook the kite. And that's just a standard kite that you would use with a twin tip or a kite surfboard or a foil. But even like where you're actually going to hook that chicken loop and hook the control bar, they have everything figured out deck hardware wise to tune this series production dinghy, specifically for kiting.
Okay, I was going to at this time give a little instructional, because you're never a better teacher than when you've just learned something. But we're rolling through the clock here, so I'm going to go do it really quick, and you'll just have to go to Real Water Sports in North Carolina or a number of other great places where there's professional instruction. You can be safe, and you'll be up and flying and having fun in no time. But basically, how a kite works. A kite is an airfoil. I mean, if we saw in that last shot, it's doing the same thing that your sail does. It's not a spinnaker. It's got flow going from leading edge, which in this case is sort of at 2 o'clock, to the trailing edge. And because it has flow, it has an airfoil shape, it's generating lift. And you also, by adjusting both the angle of attack, which is basically where the kite is in the wind flow, you can adjust the amount of lift or drag. And we'll see a little bit more with the instruction. Now, one of the key things that's really a little bit different than a boat is number 3. The direction of the pole determines your direction. Like, you can get power at a bunch of different angles. That last shot, they had a power, the angle is to leeward and forward, and the net vector with the lateral resistance of whatever the Kite Tender has underwater is allowing it to go forward. But with kiting, the kite could be behind you and be pulling just as hard. Or in the case of jumping, we saw you can create power going straight up. So that's one of the cool variations. And then you also have another little bit different than a sail is the power of apparent wind. Now, we've seen that with windsurfers and multi-hulls and faster monohulls, that you build your own speed, and that's where the speed comes from. But you also have the ability, which you don't, except maybe when you pump a sail on a sailboat, of moving the kite and moving it very fast to create even more apparent wind. And that extra dimension is what opens the door to a lot of the activities. And here is a little shot of me at an early lesson at Real a couple years ago, learning to, and I've got the flow. I'm moving the kite around a little bit to get some apparent wind, but I'm trying to get the angle right and the amount of power right, and then get my feet positioned. So this is the big thing, Trip, is how do you learn? We've got a nice little section here. Go for it.
All right. So, learning a kiteboard. So, the main thing with learning a kiteboard is you want to do it in the right order. And I think a lot of people, mistakenly, they'll watch a show like this, or they'll go down to their local beach and they'll see kiteboarding. And then the very first thing they do is they go out and buy a 12-meter kite and just try and figure it out. I can tell you from personal experience, that's definitely the wrong way to go. We had to do that in '98 because there weren't any good schools to go to. But since then, basically the way that you learn how to kiteboard, step number 1 is to get a trainer kite and to watch the instructional videos online. Like, we have all of our instructional videos online, and we'll do that link hit at the end of this show. But with the trainer kite, you're training on land. You're familiarizing yourself with how to turn the kite, with where the power is in the power zone, how to launch the kite, how to land the kite. You could do mock board starts, like basically diving the kite and getting up onto your feet, like you would on a board start on a twin tip, and just basically understanding and getting all the muscle memory and just making it second nature to fly that kite before you get into the water, which is going to be a little bit harder than just doing it on the beach. The trainer kites are typically smaller. They're typically ram air, like those larger racing kites you saw in the previous slide. And why they make them ram air is so that when you're learning, if you make a mistake flying it and you crash it into the ground, you're not crashing your inflatable kite into the ground and potentially popping it. And it also, by having them be smaller, if you do something wrong, you don't get lifted really high in the air or really fast down the beach on your stomach.
And one of the great things is the sailors already, you teach a lot of people, and people come in that have no sailing experience at all. But for us sailors, we know that the wind direction and its velocity is the center of our universe, and our orientation system rotates with the wind direction. So as sailors, we have one step up as a beginner.
I can't begin to tell you, like Peter, how important that is, and how much actually I think sailors take it for granted. Because we teach wakeboarders, we teach surfers, and you would think like 20 knots, like people know what 20 knots is, but that's because you and I, we've been born and bred in 20 knots. But if you were to ask a surfer or a wakeboarder, they wouldn't know what 20 knots is, and they wouldn't know what a north wind is. Like it's just not something that they're used to, And so like having that as a background, I think is really valuable coming into the sport. This next video is step 2. So, after you've watched the instructional videos and mastered the trainer kite, the next thing you do is you get in the water with a full-size inflatable kite, and you're doing body drags downwind and generating power with the kite in the same manner that you'd be generating power with a kite riding a twin tip or a surfboard. You leave the board out of it, and so you're basically just dragging through the water and planing. You're kind of planing off of your thighs or planing off of your shins, depending on how powered you are. And you want to end that exercise with the kite at neutral, and then you want to go body drag in the other direction. And so what we've found is that by using that full-size kite in the water without the board, you can again really focus on flying the kite. You can learn how to relaunch the kite from the water when you crash it in the water, and you don't have to worry about the board. You don't have to worry about learning how to kite and ride the board at the same time. You're just really focused on the kite. So the next step, step 3, is learning how to ride the board. So typically with this part of the class, we do it behind a jet ski, and we're using a twin tip board in this photo. If you're a surfer or you're a windsurfer, we might do that on a directional board because it's a little bit easier and it's a little bit more what those two are used to with the fins in the back. But on this clip, Becky, the student, is riding a twin tip, and she's being pulled up on top of the board and learning how to weight the board so it goes in a direction. Again, no kite, so she could really focus on the footwork and the stance on the board, and just focus on the learning of just riding the board. So this clip is when we put it all together, right? This is what we're looking for, with every instructional experience, and it's getting the board on. By the time you've gotten to this part of your class, of the instruction, you feel comfortable flying the kite. You can put the kite in neutral above your head. You can put the board on your feet. You can dive the kite, and hopefully you're riding away. But we have a lot of people that learn really, really quickly, and that's Matt right there. And it's, from a coaching perspective, that never gets old. Like seeing people get their absolute first ride ever is just awesome. So, and that's with Matt, that's he's well into his thousands of people that he's taught, and and he's still stoking when somebody gets up and gets their first ride.
And you see that dive there, folks. With the kite, she's pulling the bar down. The kite goes down. That's building that apparent wind and giving you that sort of big punch out of the hole, because you're very draggy until you get up on the board. Once you're up on the board and planing, you can all of a sudden the aerodynamics get a little bit easier. But here you got to kind of create some force depending on the wind speed. And there's a superstar right there.
Yeah, so that's actually a shot of one of the lessons that we taught here, and that's Ryan Bowen, one of our coaches. He's on the jet ski, and once we take off under the water and we start going out on the water with the student, the coach is always on the ski upwind of the student and is able to track them and continue to give them information for the next part of the class. On the board is Donovan Frankenrider. So Donovan, obviously real famous musical performer, travels all over the world, and has done quite a few shows here on our waterfront stage. And one of the years that Donovan came, and Donovan's also a professional surfer, so he was coming here looking to surf. The surf was flat, but it was windy. And so we took him out on the water, and Ryan taught him how to kiteboard, or in this photo, he's kite surfing, right? Because he's on a directional board, a surfboard style board, and just absolutely ripping. I mean, Donovan, obviously, he can surf in his sleep. He's so good at it. He's got such a good surf style. So with Donovan, it was quite a bit easier to teach him, just because we had to teach him how to fly the kite and teach him how to get up on the board with the power stroke straight down, and he was up and riding, and with actually really good body positioning as well. So that's all within the first lesson, with Donovan. So it was cool, really cool guy, and incredible musician. The shows that he did here were really good. So that's looking at our facility here in Cape Hatteras. So, in teaching people, when Matt and I started Reel, our mission statement was, and this is, all the way back in 2001, the mission statement that we started with, and still to this day, we're always going to stick with it, is we make new riders every day. And coming off the heels of windsurfing didn't really have established schools, with infrastructure and facilities and permits, for the long run, to build a steady, business where you could, or a steady school where you could teach people reliably, on a daily basis. So we looked outside of windsurfing and towards sports, that had been around for the long haul, to create a stable environment, for teaching, not only like where the students could reliably find a school and get out there and learn how to do it, but also that would attract the talent from a coaching standpoint as well. So we looked to snow sports like skiing and snowboarding and how they ran their programs. And then we also looked actually at the sailing, at the junior sailing. And I grew up in an environment on the South Shore of Long Island on the Great South Bay. And, the junior sailing program there at the Babylon Yacht Club when I was growing up, every year, like that program had sailing coaches, they had sailboats, they had the different age groups, they had racing, and it was just an environment. It was a full immersion environment where you could just plug in and go. Basically any kid that wanted to learn how to sail could go to it. And also, the ASA with the adults is the same program. But the looking at the snow sports and just the professionalism of the coaches and the full uniforms and the reliability of the programs and the junior sailing program, we took a lot from those three different areas to create what we have. And typically we have 25 or more full-time coaches, and they're teaching 7 days a week, twice a day. And people are able to come in, and when they want to get into the sport, it's definitely the place to go, and wide open access into the water, and the water is nice and shallow. It's waist deep basically to every horizon, so it makes it really accessible and easy, forgiving place to learn.
One of my favorite places to go. There's the view, the 180 degrees the other way, and you can see that giant lawn there, and just when the lessons are going on, it's just eye candy with all the different kites and stuff, and the instructors and jet skis going in and out, and in this case maybe waiting for a little bit of wind, looking at those high cirrus clouds there. But let's take a look now at some of the places you can go kiting. Obviously the Outer Banks of North Carolina are a great place to go for a lot of reasons, but the world is our oyster. And speaking of oysters, there's a shot of Charlie and Liz Ogletree, who are on the second edition of what used to be Inside Sailing Web Wednesdays. And we did a show on them cruising their catamaran Kaya all around the Caribbean and Turkey. And Charlie is an avid kiter, and he's been to Reel, he's friends with Trip. And he launches his kite right off of the catamaran. This is a shot of the kite kind of parked in the water, waiting for a little bit more breeze. And he says, Liz, I'll be back when the sushi's made, and can go off and have fun. So, and that's kiting. There's so many cool places, and we'll quickly go through this amazing some of the great shots we've collected. Of course, Yoda loves to go to Tarifa, Spain. Tarifa was a big high wind surf spot. That's actually BB, my Chihuahua, and she loved following me when I went to Tarifa. There's no jet skis there. There's no instructors. The instructors on the beach whistling at you, and you better hope that you can hear it with your head in the water. But BB, I mean, there are hundreds and hundreds of kites. Most people are pretty beginning level, back and forth things, slowly going downwind. But what a great place to go on the right near the. That's actually looking out at Africa in the background. It's right at the straits, opening the straits of the Mediterranean Sea. There's we did another feature inside sailing show. Just the last one, most recent one, was on the Bitter End Yacht Club, and there's the Bitter End right there. Another great high wind space. Any place where you have enough wind velocity, right, Trip, you can go kiting.
And I think, one thing to point out, Peter, is, how well, kiteboarding fits in with sailing, because if you think about it, trying to take your laser with you on your sailboat or your sunfish with you on your cruising sailboat, it's obviously going to be tough, but, the kiteboarding gear, like the twin tip and the kite itself, like here's, this is a complete kite right here in this backpack. You can have, and this is a North Reach kite, like by the same North as North Sails. So, the gear is real small and it fits either in a sail locker or down below on one of the bunks, like in one of the quarter berths that's not being used. And, then when you get to these beautiful places, you could just anchor, launch the kite off the boat or off the local beach, like take your dinghy into the beach. And, every one of those new cruising locations becomes like a new place to take sessions, which is a lot of fun on a cruising itinerary. So looking at this picture, these are a couple pictures that Karolina Winkowska sent us. And Karolina is a professional kiteboarder. She rides for Slingshot Kiteboarding, and she's actually won the Wind Voyager Triple S here a few different times, and incredibly talented female kiter. And looking at the watercolor, I was just mesmerized looking at these photos and following her and her boyfriend Alex on this trip. It was because I've been to the Maldives for surfing, and they went to a different location that was primarily kiting, and it was just absolutely incredible. If you just look at the water color and the water clarity, and the gear size that you fly with, even if you're flying with 3 kites and a twin tip and a small directional, all of those things fit in a travel bag about the size of a large golf bag. And it typically has wheels on it, and most times you're not even getting charged excess baggage to fly with it. So it really kind of opens up the different places that you can go on vacation and go kiting. This is one of our coaches, Austin Leader, and this is this winter, literally right before the worldwide shutdown, and in Cape Town. And you can see how high they're getting. Now, this is when you combined really windy conditions with a wave to jump off of. And obviously he's either strapped there or even with boots, like wakeboard boots. But that's the height that, this kind of showcases the height you can get when you have really strong winds and a ramp to launch off of. This is a shot that was taken, again, by Luke Johnson, one of our coaches that you saw in that downwinder video footage. And this is in the Turks and Caicos. We do a lot of offsite coaching. And so like where our coaches fly into different locations around the world and do the teaching there. And this is, the Turks is really popular, consistent breeze, obviously incredible watercolor and clarity. And this is one of the shots that Luke sent back to us, mid-trip, kind of rubbing it in, saying, hey, is it this blue where you guys are?
That's beautiful. Beautiful.
But and then that was the shot that we had earlier in the show. That's from Fiji, and again, just really highlighting the different tools in your toolbox. A lot of times people get fixated on one sport, and for the surfers out there, just being reliant on clean waves, like you're always going to get, you know, either windy conditions or onshore winds or maybe flat surf and windy. And then if you're able to break out a kite and again, ride it on the same board that you would have been surfing anyway, it gives you a whole new, you know, round of conditions that you're going to be happy with rather than frustrated with. But I'll tell you the thing that I found about kiting that I think really makes it appealing for travel as well, or even not traveling, is that, you know, when I was windsurfing, it became more destination dependent. Like the more I got into windsurfing and the more I got into wave sailing and the more I got into high wind sailing, it became like a more and more narrow slice of the world, like where I was really excited about it. Where kiteboarding, you don't really need much wind to kite, especially with foiling. You don't need any wind to kite. And you're, you know, really happy. I mean, if you have 15 knots of wind and flat water and you're, you know, jumping 20 feet off the water and hucking tricks and everything else, like you really don't even need an exotic location. And windsurfing, and you'll probably agree with this, you know, in windsurfing, it was Maui, the Gorge, you know, Cape Hatteras in the spring and fall. And that was, you know, that was about it. You know, maybe some of the European locations, but in kiting, I mean, I took a session the year that my older daughter was born on the Ohio River, launching out of this digging club in Louisville, Kentucky, jumping over river boats. And, you know, I'm in the middle of America, you know, on this brown river, and there's, you know, tractors like, you know, mowing, you know, farming on the side of the river stuff. You never would have windsurfed there in your entire life, you know? And it's, I think that's what's really, you know, really cool about the sport is it's just open to, it kind of opens up the condition spectrum to what a lot more people have access to.
Yeah, I visited my daughter who was working in DC right before our first trip to here to Real Water Sports in North Carolina for our first set of lessons. And it snowed. There was like 4 inches of snow on the mall in Washington, D.C. between the White House and the Washington Monument and Lincoln Memorial. And there was a kite out there doing that, you know, same thing we saw in that video earlier. It's they're everywhere. I was floored when you talked about the estimated number of people that go kiting. What was that?
Yeah, so it's you know, they've got it at over 1 million worldwide, and you know, there's a lot of people doing it, and it's just become a very accessible and easy to learn sport. I mean, we had, you know, one of our past coaches, Matt Raincock, you know, a lot of his nickname is M2. And, you know, he said, if you don't learn how to kiteboard now, you'll still suck this time next year. And that's actually was put on a shirt, you know, because the learning curve is really similar to snowboarding in that it's pretty flat and then it's just vertical. And, you know, compared to windsurfing, which can take, you know, decades to get good, you know, kiteboarding, once it clicks for you in those first couple days, you can be, you know, launching big airs and jumping and exploring all these different disciplines, you know, quite quickly compared to a lot of other sports. So it's I mean, it's definitely a game changer for sure. It's a real life video game is the best way to describe it.
Yeah, well, the for those of us, you in the audience that, you know, want to see more of what we've seen today, almost all, except for the pictures of BB, the Chihuahua, and Tarifa, pretty much all the pictures and videos we've seen are courtesy of Real Water Sports and Trip. And I know at the website there, you've got a landing page. It's Zero to Hero, which is the name of the ultimate learning to kiteboard course that they feature there. That there's a lot more. So go there and have a look around. It's a wild, crazy world. Now, Trip, we've got some questions here, and I hope you're going to have some time to answer a few before we have to sign off. So I'm going to.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, Peter, backing up to that last slide, I mean, that's a nice aerial. If you could back up to it, if we got just a second. That's a great overview of, you know, of everything that's here when people come here to visit us. There's accommodations. There's accommodations on site. That building on the left, the white and gray building, that's Waterman's Retreat. So you're able to stay, you know, basically it's like staying slopeside, you know, like when you're, or mountain front when you're skiing. And so ski in, ski out right out of that building. There's a restaurant on the water right there. There's live music. Actually, Peter's performed on the stage right there, the waterfront stage. And that's where our school's operated out of and where our shop is. So everything's right there, and it's easy to, you know, just come in and get your kite on. The website that is listed there, therealwatersports.com/0 to hero. That's where our instructional videos are hosted on our website, and you can go there and watch the 0 to hero instructional video for free, and then you can also watch the sequel, which is called Evolution. And you know, it's just, those are great learning tools to familiarize yourself with what it's going to take to get yourself into the sport, and also to get those visuals for your primer before you come here and get on the water with our coaches.
All right. So into the Q&A room. Oh, good question. Let's talk about safety. Safe sailing. Please comment on the innovations in safety.
So yeah, safety is a big part of kiteboarding, you know, because the kites have they can create a lot of power, and if you use them improperly, you know, there are safety concerns. So the number one thing in safety is building a solid foundation of knowledge of how to use the equipment. And so if we rewound, you know, in the presentation to, you know, following those 4 steps, it's trainer kite and instructional video, then the inflatable kite, then the board ride, then combining everything. And if you do that, you create a stable foundation to your knowledge of the sport, and you understand how to use the gear, so you don't get yourself into a situation where you're like, oh, wait a minute, what do I do now? Because you've built it up from the beginning, rather than starting at the top and then the foundation crumbling underneath you. A secondary, but also important, is the safety systems that they've developed in the kite. Once you have that stable foundation of knowledge on, you know, how to operate the gear and how to conduct yourself on the water, you also have the ability to let go of the bar and all the power goes away, or sheet out the bar and all the power goes away. And then also you have the ability to eject out of the chicken loop, where you just pull the quick release and the kite flags out like, you know, basically flags out like if you were to blow the guy on a spinnaker. It just flags out, there's no more power, and then it just falls to the water.
Yep, it turns to a 1-point sail, where you're just pulling at 1 point, and at that point it just becomes a flag flagging in the wind. Okay, Thomas asks, I windsurf, I wakeboard, and have a training kite to practice with. I've had a half-a-day lesson to get a taste of surfboarding. Can I learn at your school at my own speed, or would I need to follow a prescribed lesson plan? And let's talk about learning in general. I mean, yeah, obviously Reel is the place to go, but there's a bunch of places you can go, and there are some good instructional spots elsewhere. With that level of background, what would you recommend? And
so,
what's minimalistic for them?
Sure. And so Peter, that viewer's name was what again?
Thomas.
So Thomas has a lot of things going for him with the windsurfing and the wakeboarding. The windsurfing obviously has taught him a lot about the wind and planing and kind of board handling. The wakeboarding has taught him a lot about edging. So Thomas is going to learn pretty quickly once he's, you know, immersed in the knowledge and the culture and in the environment. So private lessons would be a good way to go for Thomas, because then he could learn at his own rate and get a little bit more vertical in his curve, especially, and also the trainer kite. Like a lot of people, everybody's always trying to like kind of skip a step, you know, and the trainer kite, Thomas is going to come to Reel steering the kite properly, which is in and out motions, like where other people, the first time they're truck driving, they're like this. And so because Thomas has been flying the trainer kite, he's got the edge control with his wakeboarding, and also board skills with his wakeboarding, and he has the wind knowledge. So somebody like Thomas, I think we get a little bit more out of private lessons, but there's also the camps. There's the 0 to hero camp, you know, where if you're coming in at a rank beginner, that would be a good environment to put yourself in, like a 2-to-1 student to coach ratio.
And you knew you were going to get a question. This Daniel asks, what are the equipment cost ranges from beginner to expert, and maybe talk a little bit about the different disciplines too.
So, I mean, just like any other sport, you can spend as little as you want or as much as you want. It's definitely worth investing money into the gear and thinking about, basically planning out what you want to get and getting the right stuff in the beginning. The gear has advanced so much, the safety systems have advanced so much, and in the end, you actually end up spending less money and having more fun if you buy new gear that's thought out well and kind of planned well than you are piecing together used gear. And I remember this, from my original days of windsurfing, and all I could afford was used gear, and I was like fixing it with like duct tape and sticky back Dacron, and in between every session. In kiting, it's a lot worse because used gear typically means bladders that are blown and swimming in, and lines that break, and different things. So it's definitely worth getting well thought out and the proper sizes, and not a lot of gear, but just the right sizes and a quiver that's well thought out. So, working with a good shop that sets you up with the right equipment. Typically the kites are, a new kite's about, average ballpark $1,500. Boards are right around, between $500 and $700. You can get them for less on the boards and less on the kites when you put them together in like a complete package, like for somebody's first set of gear.
And you need, you get board, you need a harness, a bar, right?
Yeah, you need a bar to go with the kite. You need a harness, which is, similar. Like if they're coming from windsurfing, it's similar to a windsurfing harness, although there's design elements in the harness to help keep it down with the pull of the kite being up a lot of times even straight up. You don't want the harness riding up on you.
And one of the things that I like, as just maybe between beginner and intermediate now, is a little bit extra flotation. At Rio, we all wore life jackets, mandated, and obviously Coast Guard approved. But when you're out there on your own, the life jacket's pretty bulky, as we know, for the dinghy sailors know. You try to thin that down, but they do make some cool little flotation vests that are also add a little bit of impact protection. I know some of my foiling friends wear the same flotation vest, which is not as bulky as a proper PFD that we might see on a dinghy or a big boat, but adds that little bit of flotation. That's another nice thing to have, as well as a wetsuit. Speaking of wetsuits, Christopher asked, what's the best time of year to come and learn to kiteboard in Hatteras?
So we kiteboard here 12 months a year, and typically we're getting 20 days or more a month of good kiteable wind, and so that's year round. We're actually in our two of our most consistent months right now. June and July are the 2 months where it blows the most days out of the month, and it's kind of crazy because a lot of people, especially the windsurfers, would think like April and October. April and October are our highest peak wind speeds, but not the most consistent, during the month, but still very consistent. You can pretty much reliably count on 20 days a month. I would say, anytime between late March and November. We run full coaching staff, full skis all the way through Thanksgiving weekend. But if you're here, anytime April through November when you can make it, you're going to have a good time, especially if you have the gear for the cooler temps. If you want to be, just in board shorts, that's typically more the summer months. That's like June through September. Because we're 4 months a year, we're just in trunks here, and then the rest of the year we're in, either a thin wetsuit or a full suit.
Speaking of wind velocity, what is the ideal wind for sort of the low, high, and medium range that you can operate in? And obviously it depends on your equipment a bit too.
We're going out on the lessons, like typically 10 knots. Anything over 10 knots is teachable. And, for having a good time and getting powered up, like you're on, and it depends on what you're riding too. If you're going out on a foil board, anything under 10, unless it's 0, is still a lot of fun, because you get to go out in just, super glassy conditions. The twin tippers are going to, they're going to be happier, having stuff above 10 knots, 10, 15, 20 knots of wind. But there's so much fun that can be had in between 10 and 20 and there's so much 10 and 20 in the world, where in windsurfing, we were always waiting for 20 plus, and to open up that 10 to 20, and then now to open up the 5 to 10 with foiling, you think about how many places in the world does it blow 5 to 20 consistently. That's a lot of kiteboarding.
Cool. And here's our final question. It's going to be really interesting, and I wonder if you know the answer to this, but you probably have an idea. What's the single longest distance ever traveled by a kiter?
Like in the air or on the water?
Both. Let's do both. Let's give some numbers.
Well, I think in the air, we actually hosted on the Discovery Channel. So if you Google Discovery Channel and Stunt Junkies and Jason Slezak, we actually hosted a show on the Discovery Channel. They used to run a show called Stunt Junkies, where like recognized athletes in different sports could kind of create their own stunt. And Jason did the longest ramp to ramp gap jump over land. So basically Evel Knievel style, like taking off of a ramp and landing on a ramp, which is really hard to do in kiteboarding. I don't remember the exact distance, but if you Google it, you can watch that show, and it's absolutely incredible. As far as like the distance, the furthest that anybody has gone on a kite, there have been transatlantic missions that have been done, off of a like a mothership kind of scenario, like a home base, like where they're kiting during the day and then coming back on board at night, and gone across the Atlantic. So I'd have to say that would be the longest. I mean, there are stops during that, but that was the longest as far as on the water.
Yeah, well, think about it. That's long. I mean, think about it just from nonstop. If you're doing 20 plus, if you're ripping on a good day, and if you can, it's how much your body can take, right? If you're 6 hours, it's 120 nautical miles. If you're more, just do the multiplication. But it's Trip, I would really like to thank you for coming on board and sharing all these great images and stories with us. I mean, I'm really proud to, on behalf of the American Sailing Association, to be able to sort of reveal this great sport that I've become infatuated with. And you've been around in the education side of things since the very beginning, and it's been a lot of fun to prepare for this show and then to do it. And I really just want to thank you and your team for all that you do for the sport and for what you put into this show. It's been a lot of fun.
Thanks, Peter. We really enjoyed being a part of it. It's always a pleasure to have yourself and have Marley, come here, and the sailing world in general, with sailing being such a big part of our lives, previous and also current, like to see sailors getting into the sport and see what they, get out of the sport is really, it's just really cool to watch and really cool to, to be a part of, like to see them travel down like it's basically just another avenue of sailing. And, for a lot of people that are watching this show, they have no idea of your music capability, on the guitar and on the mic. I would definitely recommend.
I get it right.
Oh, there we go. So to give you a little background on Peter, he at last year's Wind Voyager Triple S Mixmaster Mike of the Beastie Boys. Mixmaster Mike of the Beastie Boys was the opening ceremonies talent. So everybody knows the Beastie Boys, and Mixmaster Mike is the DJ from the Beastie Boys, and he really gets a party going. So Peter and Marley were here kiteboarding with us, and Peter really wanted to get up on stage and play. So we gave him the stage, and actually Peter opened up for Mixmaster Mike, and he held it down. He actually, everybody in the yard was all of a sudden listening to, Peter as if he was on the poster with everybody else, which was incredible. So thank you for having us be on the show. And, hopefully you'll sign off with a tune right now.
Well, you never know. Yeah, we did it for the first one. Okay, everybody. I would like to thank Trip Foreman and his team from Real Water Sports, and thank you guys for coming on board for this episode of Inside Sailing. This is American Sailing Association's contribution to the sailing community during these times when maybe we can't get out on the water as much as we'd like to. And I'm really, really proud to be able to bring such great content and great individuals and talent on board like we had today. And so on behalf of our entire ASA team, the tech team that puts the show together, and the marketing team that helps spread the word, and everybody behind the scenes that's working on the ASA's educational program, and looking forward to when all the ASA schools can get going again at 100% and people can get back out on the water and learn to do what we love to do the best. I would like to say